welcome back to my channel and welcome back to a palette week video. I'm not sure what order I am posting my palette week videos in, so I don't know what day this is, but today I'm really excited to chit chat with you guys about 13 palettes I would buy again if I lost these palettes. Like if I lost my eyeshadow palette collection or if I lost these palettes specifically, I would definitely buy them again because I love them that much. That is what we're going to be discussing today, but before we get into it, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you love product painting content, palette content, or you just like to chit chat about makeup, I would love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Alright you guys, this started as a list of 10, and then as I was grabbing these palettes out to film this video, I was like, you know what? Like I have to add these other 3 at least. Now I did try to choose all palettes, like not limited. I tried not to include limited edition palettes is what I'm trying to say, because there are some limited edition palettes in my collection. Sultry, Jackie, or like ABH Jackie, ABH Sultry, the Friendcation palette that like are limited edition that like I don't know if you can get or not get. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they, I don't know. I didn't include those, but if I lost those and was given the option to replace them, those are 3 more that I would add to this list. But let's just dive into it. So let's start with Colourpop. There are 3 palettes that I would replace from Colourpop if I lost these, and I'm hoping that these are not limited. Like you never know with Colourpop, things come and go. So if one of these or some of these are a limited edition, I'm sorry. So up first, here is the newest one that I've added to my collection, or yeah. You guys, I am struggling with my words as always. Anyway, it's the Wild Child palette. I recently ranked this in the palettes I tried in February video that I can leave a link down below if you want to see where I rank this. Obviously very high. I really enjoy this palette. I love that it's deeper. It can give you a super sultry, like sexy, smoky, warm brown eye. I love the shimmers in here. It's a beautiful palette, and it's one that like, even though I'm no longer like testing it, I keep wanting to reach for this. So this is definitely one that I would replace. Plus Colourpop's a little bit more affordable, so I would be like feeling a little bit less hurt in the wallet if I replace my Colourpop palettes. The Going Coconuts is another one that I would want to replace. This one is a little bit more neutral than the Wild Child, and you know, most of the time during the week I'm wearing neutral eyeshadow looks to work. This is one that I really like to reach for if I have no idea what I want to do or if I'm running out the door. It's a very, very easy palette to work with and to kind of just not think about and create like a fine look. And by fine, I mean just like, yeah, a look you like, you know? And then the Lil Ray of Sunshine palette. I hope that this is still available. This is the one that I'm like most unsure of. This was their, I think, first all matte palette, and I just freaking love this. This gives me all the fall vibes. This is another one when I finished testing it, I continued to want to reach for this one, and I just love it. So this is absolutely one that I would want to replace if I lost my collection. All right, you guys, this is another one I thought was like going out of stock, but then I've heard you can get this again, and whew, if I lost this, I would be devastated. Do you guys know what palette I'm talking about? I would love to know if you guess right. The Huda Beauty Smokey Obsessions. Probably one of my favorite palettes in my collection of all time. When we could travel, this went with me everywhere. Everywhere. Like this is like if I was traveling, I could just instantly, like this would be the first thing to go in my travel makeup bag because I knew it would be coming with me. I just love this. It is so pretty, so effortless to use. Every time I've created a look with this palette, I just absolutely love my makeup and I just can't help myself. This would be one I would really want to have in my collection. If you can hear my dogs floofing around as usual, I do apologize. There are going to be a lot of, it's mostly neutral palettes, you guys, because again, I wear mostly neutrals. This one is newer to my collection, and this is one that I definitely would want to replace. And it has, you know, some pops of color, some blue. This is the Lunar Beauty Eternal Eclipse palette, and I love this. I think Vanny has such good quality eyeshadow, and what I love about this palette is it's neutral, but you can also play around with the blues, and it is just beautiful. I am super intimidated by blue eyeshadow, but I have had so much fun playing around with this palette, and I would absolutely want to have this in my collection if I lost it. I really like the row of brown neutral matte shades. This is a palette, again, where if I'm like flying out the door, I have reached for this so often recently just to toss. Mostly just this shade is like my favorite one and done matte in the crease, and I'm good to go. So I would absolutely want to replace that. Let's bring it back to Huda, because you guys know I love Huda Beauty eyeshadows. I had to include both of these large palettes, and that would be painful because these are expensive $65 eyeshadow palettes, but I absolutely would replace Mercury Retrograde. We know I like to live my life in a constant state of Mercury Retrograde, so like this is like the mascot palette of my life. The mascot of my life palette. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. This palette is a great representation of myself. And this one also has some fun pops of color, so I feel like that like playful side of me would be able to have fun with this palette, because if I lost my entire makeup collection and was lacking color, I could get some fun pops from this. And I love this palette. You guys know I talk about that palette quite a bit on my channel. And more recently, I have added the Naughty palette to my collection, and this is another just beautiful neutral palette. Even though it looks like there's some browns in here, I find when I use this palette, typically my looks end up leaning more mauve tone, which is fine with me. I love mauve tones. Ooh, I would also want to replace my Lawless, the baby one palette. I just realized, but that's beside the point. I'm not including that in this video, but I would want to replace it. I love this palette. I think it has some really fun pops as well. Like the foiled shades are really poppy in my opinion, but you can also do like a really soft neutral look with this as well. And I just think it's a stunning palette. This is one I love because I feel like it can really bring you from day to night, which would be nice. Not that I ever, you know, my day to night looks like work and then going to bed at 8, but you know, by the off chance I were to stay up till 9, this could bring me till 9 o'clock. Ooh, this next one would be so painful to have to replace, but I would have to replace my Natasha Denona Gold palette. And when I first saw this release, I was like, who in their right mind would buy this palette that has a bunch of matte browns that all look the same? But once you see this in person, you can tell that the mattes actually don't look the same. This is again something that like if I am just wanting something very simple I can reach into, but because of the pops of green, which we all know I love a good pop of green, it has some fun pops of blue and some really intense foiled shades. You can do a lot with this palette being such a neutral palette, which I just absolutely love about this palette. Mostly I would just keep it for, honestly, just the different tones of some of these brown mattes I would want to have in my collection, but I also absolutely love the pops of green. This is a palette I reach for often when we go on date nights, which is about once a year. So I reach for it about once a year for those very special occasions. But if you only go on date night once a year, then it is a very special occasion, meaning that this is a very special palette to me. Do you get my drift? Another neutral palette. I have four more neutral palettes, and then we'll end with a colorful palette. The Kaleidos Sashimi City. You guys, I have reached into this palette for this shade specifically so many times recently, and I always get compliments on it. If you want to make like just like the most basic look just absolutely pop, like you can take this from like 0, well, probably like 50 to 100 so quickly. This on its own also just looks like such a glossy, wet, beautiful piece of artwork. I am obsessed. So I honestly would buy this palette just to replace this shade, but this is also a really nice palette because it just has some fun warm browns, a coral. This is something I know I will be using all of the time come the summertime, so that is absolutely one I would want to replace. The Artist Couture Supreme Nudes palette. This is just such good quality and I love the color story. Again, it offers me a good green and most importantly, just some great basic brown matte shades, which yes, I have in many of the other palettes that I've already talked about, but I just have adored this palette since I picked it up. This is another one that I just feel inclined to reach for. Even though I'm trying to test other palettes, like I just want to reach for this. This is another one I know when we can go traveling, I will bring this traveling, especially because I feel like with the packaging, it feels really sturdy. And I feel like the formula on this one is a little bit more firmly pressed, so I wouldn't be as nervous about like the eyeshadows cracking. I love the sleek packaging. This is just, this is such a good one. I definitely would replace this if I lost it. That was like a really aggressive like, The Nabla side by side. I love Nabla. So I was trying to just choose one that I would replace, although even some of my other Nabla cuties I would also want to replace just because they have some really unique formulas and shades. But I decided to just include the one side by side, that one palette, the side by side palette. Again, you guys are probably like, girlfriend, like you have enough brown eyeshadow, like what the heck. But I love this. Again, for my everyday preferences, this works best for me. I'm gonna get the most out of this palette. You get tons of the you do get most of the Nabla like textures, I feel like, in here. The only one I don't know that is, the only one that's not included in this is the latex formula, which is not my favorite by Nabla, but you get a good range of some of the other textures, and it's just such a beautiful palette. I did not include the ABH Soft Glam palette because I included this, and I feel like truly if I lost my Soft Glam but had this palette, I would not feel the need to replace my ABH Soft Glam. So the Persona Identity one, another neutral palette, but one that I really love. I love the shimmers in here just because they're so smooth. A lot of people talk about this, but if you have more mature eyelids, this is a great option for you if you still like to use shimmer on your eyelids because it is such a smooth formula. I personally do have textured eyelids, I feel like, in my opinion, and I have hooded eyes. So sometimes I do struggle with finding a good like foiled or shimmer formula, and I absolutely adore the foiled shadows in this palette. I love the shade Bombshell because it's like this taupey shade that almost has just a hint of like a green undertone to it. Like is it green? Like, is it green? I don't know. But I love that shade. I love the shade Sassy as an inner corner highlight, and the mattes perform so well. I obviously have the old packaging, so I actually probably will end up replacing this someday and buy the one in the newer packaging, but it's such a good palette. Highly recommend. And then the 13th and final palette that I would replace is the Glamlight Cake Palette. The Glamlight formula is incredible, and this would give me a whole spectrum of color to use on the days that I want to be a little bit more playful. I had to choose one colorful palette, and this is the one that I would go with. I think this is beautiful. I love the shimmers. I love all of the colors, and these perform so well for being such vibrant, intense colors. So if I lost this, I definitely would replace this, and it comes in like this really cute easy bake oven. Right now I'm doing this 75-day challenge where I'm currently not eating any cake, ice cream, candy, blah blah blah, so like this just gives me like the cake vibes when I'm feeling a little bit hungry. So yeah, that is gonna wrap it up for today's video, talking about 13 palettes I personally would repurchase, rebuy, whatever you want to call it, if I lost these. I would love to know what palettes within your collection would you replace, if any, or are you just kind of like, you know what, if it's lost, it's lost and it's time for something new. I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you have any other ideas for palette themed videos, leave them for me. I love to make palette themed content, so I want to hear about what you guys want to see. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel, as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's palette week video. Bye.